Yay, okay, so here we are. This is the AIM Life, and this is your life your way without aches, pains, or disease. So we're on to week 4. And let's just go over kind of what happened last week, which is our week 3 food as medicine. We talked a little bit about why we use food. Part of the strategy there is no one really signs up and says, hey, I can't wait to go to the doctor, pay more money, and get on more drugs, and possibly have to have surgery that costs money too, takes me out of work, and then I have side effects from all of that. Nobody is like, yeah, let's do that. So if there's a way that we can take ownership of our health and use food, why not use it? I gave you a bunch of different strategies, the types of foods to choose, possibly when to eat, how to eat it. To cook your food is a little easier, especially if you're a deficient kind of person, meaning like you need a little bit more nourishment and a little bit more help, or have lots of inflammation. And then I laid it out the anti-inflammatory food elimination diet. So that's the one where we're taking out some of those really kind of nasty things that can be causing us all kinds of pain, inflammation, gut issues, and brain fog. So we talked about putting up a food strategy. A lot of you have already put your food strategies up on the Facebook post, but I'm going to open it up and let you type in the chat what you'd like to tell me you did for your food strategies, or if you tried the 7-day food elimination plan, and let me know what happened. So let's start with a quote. Now, Hippocrates was a pretty cool dude. He's the one that also said, let food be thy medicine. I don't know if you remember that. And it's not like he was born in 1942. This guy was like back in the day, 400 BC or something like that. And so he was hanging out with, astronomers and scientists and stuff like this. And even back then, they knew that all disease begins in the gut. And in Chinese medicine, this is also something that is central to our school and teachings. Is we learn that there are 2 brains, your gut and also your brain. So here we go for week 4. This is the gut-brain connection, and a lot of this is some very new technology that's coming out, some Nobel prizes in medicine. I'm going to talk to you about that. Part of this information comes from like a 2013. So it's not like it's, something that we've known about for a long time. We're just learning every day about how this stuff impacts our health. So first of all, the second brain, that's kind of what we're talking about here. And how it's connected with our immune system and what that is. It's our fortress against, any sort of pathogen or dis-ease that's happening, and it's our friend. It is our castle, and I want you to think about that as a fortress, and a bit like a castle with a moat around it. Okay. The reason why we call this a second brain is we've known this for a long time in Chinese medicine, that if we treat the digestive system and start with that, then we can affect people's mood. It has effect on depression, anxiety, and calms things down. The sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems calm down. And now we are seeing that almost 90% of the serotonin, which is the feel-good kind of neurotransmitters, are found in your gut. So when I was a pharmaceutical sales rep, and I was a GI specialist, gastroenterology specialist, I would talk to GI docs all day long. And some of the new drugs that were coming out were trying to affect the irritable bowel patient. And some of those new drugs were actually SSRIs, which are the antidepressants. So they would give an antidepressant and it would calm the irritable bowel. And then they started using them and noticing that people that depression, anxiety on a antidepressant, and their gut issues got a little bit better too. So there's some interesting kind of mutualism that happens there. But look at that fortress right there, because that's kind of what we're talking about here in your immune system. Now, I can seriously go down a rabbit hole and talk for 100 years about all of the technology around immune system, but just to make it super, super duper simple, you have this canal here, this alimentary canal that starts from your mouth, goes to your anus, real sexy, but you can see that it's a tube. It's a confined tube, and I put over there on the side, it's like a highway tunnel. So it's fully enclosed, and so the rest of your body actually doesn't touch or come in and impact that tube if your immune system is working okay. Okay, so a lot of us think that this is just kind of like floating in there and everything kind of floats into each other, but it's not. This is a separate tube that goes through, and it's very sophisticated on how it takes things out and lets things through the gates. Okay, so down below you can see all those armies out there, and you've got armies of little like helper worker people that are inside your tube. So inside the cave there, these are what you call your microbes. So this is like bacteria. These are little genetic material. They're fungi. They're just a whole bunch of stuff that is bacteria that's out there that are your little workers that are keeping track of your tunnel and making sure as things come through that, okay, that's a friend, that one can come through, or that's a foe, and we are going to say, hey, you have to exit, or we're going to shoot you. So it's a bit like a war, and you've got these little workers out there that are protecting your tunnel, your canal. So that makes sense, right? Now, the one thing that I found that was amazing was that this tunnel that protects the inside of your body from the outside of your body is only 1 or 2 cells thick. Mostly it's 1. So you can see that in the purple down there. Okay, the blue ones are your little army of outside people. So I call them the helpers. Now these helpers are a bit like Border Patrol. Okay, so they're keeping track of who's coming over through the moat to get into your castle. Okay, the red things are all the things that you're eating, drinking, absorbing into your body, and this can happen all the way from the outside bacteria and microbes that you're taking in that's like a little cloud around you, like on the Peanuts cartoon Pigpen. You know, we have this almost aura of bacteria and microbes around us too, our own little environment. Then it comes in through our mouth, goes all the way through the alimentary canal, and we have these types of cells that line the inside. So you got all these little workers there that are out there doing their job. Now they're not allowed on the other side. They all know their jobs because they have these little cell phones and little barcode tracker things. So when these red things come up, they take their little barcode and they go, ding, okay, that's a carrot. A carrot is okay. So they take the carrot, break it down into these smaller items so that it can shove through the little moat, and it's entered into the other side, which goes into the lymph system, the blood. So it's almost like a water system, a whole flourishing little community on the other side. Okay? Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah, right? It looks pretty obvious, right? And that's what a perfect like immune system looks like. That's when everything's going great. Now what starts to happen is this area inside your highway tunnel is this amazing rainforest. And you might have heard of this term called the gut biome, okay? So if you think about it as a rainforest, there's bugs and mud and insects and, you know, all of these things kind of work together in order to make sure that everybody lives. It's a complex system that is helping everybody live together. And there's 100 trillion bacteria and microbes that are in this gut biome. okay? Um, Now we're now starting to discover this gut biome, and this was just in the last couple years that they have discovered what is in this, what are these biomes. Um, More specifically, they call it a holobiome, but we're just going to call it a gut biome. But just to let you know that it is all kinds of good and bad that are happening here out in the rainforest, and you get your workers that are on the border of the rainforest. It's a good thing to have the rainforest because it provides all kinds of good and bad bacteria that they're having conversations with our workers on their cell phones out there with their little barcode things, so that they can figure out who's friend or foe through their cell phone that they're talking on, okay, with their little hard hats. You can imagine the whole situation. So now, that's with the perfect immune system in your fortress. But there are things that, cause invasions into this one cell. You can imagine if it's only one cell thick, you got to be kind of careful about it. But none of us knew about this. Just a few years ago, none of us had any idea that the things that we were eating, drinking, taking into ourselves, were actually causing some sort of damage to this one cell. We thought we had like a million cells to throw away. But I'm going to talk to you about the invasions, the top disruptors. So this is Game of Thrones here. I don't know if any of you watch that, but sometimes I put myself in this gal's place of like, I am mother of dog instead of mother of dragons. But this is your fortress. You're looking over your rainforest of, good, bad, and the ugly out there. And most of it is the stuff that you want to come across into your castle are the good things. And you want your staff, your little helpers, to be keeping track of what's coming across so that it doesn't, cause a war and have all of, the moat, doors open and everybody flowing into your castle. So that makes sense, right? So we talk first about, whoops, I have one more. Yeah. So I'm going to go through a couple of these. There's like 7 of these kind of big kind of ideas of what kind of impacts your one cell and can create disease in your body. And it's kind of different from what we did last week. Last week I was telling you all the foods to eat, things to add into your diet, and then this one is a little bit more of these are the things that cause damage to your castle, and maybe think about, how you can offset these, okay? So that there's all kinds of information out there about antibiotics and the resistance that's happening with these. If you think about what an antibiotic is, it's like a Agent Orange or a napalm to your rainforest. Now, let's say you have something going in and it's like a gang, a bad gang of people out in your rainforest. And they're, a small group of people, but they're bad. So you go to the doctor says, okay, we can take care of that gang. And then they hand you the antibiotic. You carpet bomb the whole rainforest. So you kill everything. So now it looks like, Death Valley, nothing around there. And we think by just continuing on with our life, that after the course of antibiotics, everything's going to be good. What we don't realize is the bomb, the napalm of killing off the rainforest, the good, bad, and the ugly out there, also puts little holes in the wall of that one cell. It blows up all of the worker bees, and they don't know what happened. And then you've got holes. And then it takes a little while, just as in a war, when bombs are going off, all of the workers kind of hide until the bombs stop. So you almost have to wait till the antibiotic gets done, and that's when the worker bees start coming back. And these are your staff that are slowly coming back. Sometimes it takes about 2 years after one course of antibiotics. So we think, every time we have a cold or something, that we need to leave the doctor's office with the prescription or the doctor is terrible. So we have to, and even the doctors know this, that they, know that it's probably a virus, which isn't even affected by antibiotics, but they give the antibiotics anyway. And sometimes when they're too lazy to figure out or don't have enough time to figure out exactly which bug, which gang it is, they just do the whole napalm and kill everything. So you can see already how disastrous that can be for your immune system and how it needs to recover. The other thing that's interesting is not only do we take these ourselves when we go to the doctors, but it's in our food supply. So it's in our water supply. It's in the meat of the animals that you're eating. Because, if you go to a chicken farm and, a couple of them are sick with something, they don't just inoculate those two chickens. They put it in the food, in the water supply. So every chicken is getting all of that. And in fact, chickens are up until probably like last year, and still some are using arsenic in the chicken feed to kind of blush up the chickens so that they look pink for the people that are buying the chickens. So what do you think is going to happen? All of that is, happening and coming into your body. So that sentence right there, you are what you are eating, ate. So it's not like you're just eating that steak. You are eating the antibiotics and things that animal ate, and that is in its tissue and transferring to you. So of course that's going to have an effect on you. The other bit of information I found about the antibiotics is that one course of antibiotics has the propensity 50% increase in depression. So one course of antibiotics. So you go in and you get your Z-Pak or something like that because you had a sinus infection. You have a 50% increase in the chance of having depression. And now you can see why those two things kind of come together. And we have a lot of anxious people, depressed people, and people that are living with antibiotics that are clear-cutting their immune system every day. So the second thing, so obviously we want to make sure on that last one is to use those antibiotics sparingly and only for, things that are very specific to the gang that you're trying to take out, or if it's a life or death situation. Okay, so try desperately to try other things and not use those. Okay, so the second thing, this is pretty interesting conversation. I would say that most people that come to my office are on a minimum of 7 medications, and they're saying to me, I have this, all of these side effects, and one of the things that they don't even mention ever are NSAIDs. And this is something that they may take every day, twice a day, things like that. First of all, most of these drugs were invented because aspirin at the time, I think these were, kind of invented in the 60s, were aspirin. That was our only option. And as you might know, aspirin causes the stomach to bleed, and that's part of what makes things happen. But if you do too much, you can have bleeds. So they came up with this whole class of drugs, the NSAIDs, and for a while in the clinical studies, it was like, this is a miracle drug, but they were really nervous about them at first, and so they came out just as a prescription, right? But because they felt like they were pretty safe, it quickly changed to an over-the-counter situation. But as people started taking these, they were having all kinds of digestive issues that weren't necessarily in the stomach, okay? And we had SIBO and all kinds of inflammation, bacteria, bugs kind of overgrowing in the system, a lot of Barrett's esophagus, a lot of these inflammatory bowel kinds of things like Crohn's, colitis, ulcerative colitis, irritable bowel, all of those types of things, celiac disease starting to show up. And part of the reason that now these drugs have what's called a black box like a notation on their package insert. Black box simply means you can die from taking these. And this black box warning is only put on drugs that will and have been shown to kill people. And so what the drug companies have done, and I know this because I used to work for them, they package these things in very interesting ways. So when you go to the gas station, you have a headache and it's right by the cash register and they're in these little blister packs. There's this thing on the blister pack that, you know, when you open the blister pack, you accept all of the things that are in the package insert, including the fact that you can die from this little simple NSAID. Okay, so, and they don't want you to know about that because that's, you know, that would make you maybe want to take something else, right? Because why would you take a black box thing? Black box things also can kill babies in the womb, so definitely pregnant people would not be taking these. Also, it's a gateway to other painkillers, so people start taking these, they don't think they're a big deal at all. Maybe a couple times every day. 2 don't work, so I add 3. You know, I've heard of kids, you know, with their juice on the way to soccer practice giving an Advil and then after so that the kid doesn't have any muscle pain. I mean, just nuts type of things. But the thing that they started noticing is, and the reason why they couldn't figure out why they were causing all these digestive issues is the gastroenterologist only had a scope that would go up the large intestine, or a scope that would go down the mouth and only go into the stomach. So they couldn't actually get into the small intestine where, in fact, all of the destruction was happening with these drugs. So once they came up and figured out how to see that, and the only way that they could see it, they couldn't see it through a scope. They had to have people swallow the little baby cameras, and that's when they were like, oh my goodness, that is the destruction that's caused by NSAIDs. It's very interesting. So what it does is it rips away the mucosal barrier in the small intestine. So remember that alimentary canal that we were talking about, in that one cell that's keeping the bad guys from coming into your castle. Well, when you take an NSAID, it's just absolutely ripping that apart. And it causes abdominal discomfort. So you have sometimes a stomach ache, upset stomach from taking these drugs. So what do? You don't feel good, so you take more. And so it's this never-ending cycle that is pretty bad for you. You know, obviously I'm showing that. But now what do? You know, let's say you do have a headache. There's plenty of different natural things, willow bark, boswellia, these are all natural kind of anti-inflammatory things. The willow bark has been used, and I think one of the studies said it was like 40% of an opioid. So it gives you 1/40th of the feeling of pain relief of an opioid, willow bark. Okay, so there's a lot of different options for you to use, and just try to get away from these NSAIDs because they are absolutely affecting you. Then we come into stomach acid blockers, and this is another one that we eat like candy and very close to my heart because you know, Prilosec and Nexium is what I sold as a drug rep. So I was in the doctor's office. I know all the studies backwards and forwards, and that package insert for Prilosec, which was used only for a prescription drug, was only on the package insert supposed to be used for 2 weeks. And these were for special erosive esophagitis patients or patients that have like a history of Barrett's esophagus, which is a precursor to esophageal cancer. So Prilosec was a great thing that came out because it was a stomach acid blocker. So it was like if you got these little pumps in your stomach that are pumping out stomach acid, part of what people feel if they eat badly or if they have like a non-balance of their good bacteria to bad bacteria, then they have like this splashing up of the stomach acid up into the esophagus, which makes it feel like heartburn, right? So in instead of stopping eating that, causing that, you'd rather take the Prilosec because it stops the pumping of the acid. Then you feel great. You can go on and eating your pepperoni pizzas, and everything appears to be okay. Now herein lies the problem with the Prilosex, the PPIs, and all of these stomach acid blockers is stomach acid is very powerful. Okay, it's there for a reason. There's only certain bugs that can live there. And the good bugs that live there are in charge of making sure the stomach acid kills the bad bugs. That's part of the reason why you got stomach acid, okay? Is so that it can take care of level 2 of if it comes down through the mouth, it made it through the mouth, now it's in the stomach. Hey, we got some bad guys, the gang members are here. But if the helpers that are in the stomach have been blocked and they've been laid off from their job, so they're not supposed to work, then the overgrowth of the gang members on the outside starts to create an imbalance, okay? So the long-term effects of using these blockers, they're just finding out about, as they do with a lot of these drugs that are amazing at first, and then like 10 years later, we're like, oh man, now it gets ripped off the market. But Prilosec now is over the counter, right? Because it's so safe, it's like your children can eat it. But it's definitely not the case. As you can see, it's linked to brain damage, kidney disease, and it causes that bacteria to overgrow. And the bacteria that is in the small intestine, which is the next thing down the line, kind of creeps up. The good and bad bacteria that are supposed to stay in the small intestine creep up into the stomach, and this is what causes some of the things, the SIBOs and some of these other kind of digestive issues. So although we love to have sweeteners, I think we all know are bad. I think we know this, but they're just so pretty, and they sit when you go out to breakfast and you're like, well, I got to have something in my coffee. But what you don't realize is this is also napalming your rainforest as well. You don't realize it at the time because it tastes great. You just send it on through. Who cares? You know, and it's 0 calories, so I'm not going to get fat, right? Lots of research around the fact that your body has these little barcode things that are like, oh, that's a sweet. So because it's a sweet, I fire the insulin. So even though it doesn't have any sugar in it, it's still firing insulin, and it can make your cells resistant to that in the future, which leads to that, type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, all of that whole scenario. And in turn, it can increase your blood sugars and insulin, make you more and more hungry, needing to have more and more, which is kind of the standard thing. Put the sweeteners in and market it like you're going to be skinny, and the exact opposite happens. I don't know if any of you have been addicted to a diet drink like I have, but it's like coming off heroin. I mean, trying to give up Diet Dr. Pepper, where I literally dream about it, there's got to be some sort of addictive drug in there too that's making me still want to have it. So having the caffeine that comes from like a green tea is very helpful to me. So get those out of your life. If you do need to use sweeteners, use the stevia drops. You can buy a little dropper full of stevia drops and put it in your purse. And then when you go out to dinner or whatever, making your sweet tea or whatever you need for your coffee, it gives just enough sweetness, and it doesn't cause all of these things to happen. Okay, it's a good thing to use. Now this is sexy, and this is what we all want in our life, isn't it? We want to have periods at 8 years old. We want to have man boobs and giant bellies that look like we're pregnant, because what we are eating and drinking in our plastic bottles, metal food cans, in the detergents, our sunscreens, the flame retardants like the Scotch guards on our carpets, on our furniture, in food, by the way, and especially dairy products, on kids' toys that are plastic. All kinds of cosmetics have, and personal care items like shampoos and body washes filled with these hormone and endocrine disruptors that they are leaching into your biome, into your big rainforest. And what it does is these are like hormones that you're giving kind of indirectly at a low dose. Okay, so they're coming into your body as food and all of these products, and your body doesn't know the difference. So when you give somebody estrogen, it thinks it's getting pregnant. So it prepares for pregnancy in making boobs and giving you, like the fat and prep for having a baby. So that's why we start to see this look in men, and how kids at 7, 8 years old are starting to have periods, and we're like, what the heck is going on? When in our day and age, it was like the 12-year-olds having periods. So this is disturbing, because if we have this going on, and then we have how do we take all these things out of our diet? You have to really start looking at the the things that are involved in your personal care items, and maybe using metal containers to put your food in instead of those plastic things, or plastic saran wrap, or aluminum foils. Even the inside metal of food cans is lined with this stuff so that it can prevent botulism and all that stuff. So obviously this is another pull for more fresh food instead of things in cans. Looking at detergents that don't have these estrogens as well. So it's things to look at, to take out of your diet. I don't know if you know a friend of yours that is obese, maybe has reproductive issues, maybe hasn't been able to get pregnant, or has starting and stopping periods, maybe irregular periods, no periods, painful periods, all of those kinds of things. Prostate people. People in my office come in for pain or something like that if they're a dude, and then they're going, oh, by the way, I have prostate issues too. So it's like crazy town, and every person I know seems to have thyroid issues, and they're on thyroid medication. So all of these things are affecting your body. Now, this is one I literally am so passionate about. It almost makes me sad and upset, because growing up in the Midwest in Iowa, almost 100% of the Midwest, it seems, is covered in corn and soybeans. And the pigs and cows that eat the soybeans and corn. And most of these things are genetically modified foods. Almost 80% of all of our corn and soybean is. And it's treated with this stuff called Roundup, which you might have heard about, from this really great company called Monsanto. And the part in Roundup that really is causing the issue for a lot of people is glyphosate. You might have heard that word before. And it's interesting because the phosphate is used a lot to kill things. So Agent Orange was developed using part of the parts and pieces of this glyphosate. And what they started to do was they started to do, this Japanese guy started to do some studies on glyphosate, and realized that it could clean out drains. So really, industrial drains that had like guck and muck all stuck in them, causing backups and things like that. They would put some glyphosate down, almost like a Drano, and it would just eat the crap out of that, kill everything in its path. And then they started to notice at the end where the drain would come out to the real world, out into a wood clearing in a stream, of course, you can imagine this, a pipe sticking out, and then the water source, everything downstream was dead also. So it killed all of these plants, animals, everything in its path, okay? But the really crazy thing about glyphosate is it was never marketed as a killing agent in Roundup. It was marketed as a plant antibiotic. So that should scare the crap out of you a little bit, because didn't I just tell you that antibiotics are all these things causing depression, all of this? And the glyphosate has a very interesting uh, situation in that it is water soluble. So it is expended into the air, the water, anywhere, it taints everything. So it's not like it's like a fat soluble where it would rise to the surface and it could easily be cleaned out. Once it's in the water system, in the clouds, in your organic vegetables, it's in there. Okay, so it's unavoidable. It's everywhere. I have all kinds of people sending me things like the FDA has these lists of common foods that are absolutely filled with glyphosate that we are feeding to our children, and most of them come from, hello, grains. So this is another reason why these grains, maybe grains aren't the villain here, it's maybe what they've been sprayed with. The glyphosate goes in and absolutely tears up your border, puts giant gaping holes in, but not only does it, cause a war in that way, it kills everything. So the rainforest is killed. It has big bombs that are going into your wall, but also it causes a jamming of the cell phone service to your workers and to you. So now you got these big open breaches of your castle, and now your workers are trying to give you some information with their sophisticated stuff, but now you can't hear it. So it's similar to having this really expensive cell phone and not being able to communicate with it when you go up a mountain or like dip into a pass or something, and you're like, why doesn't this thing work? It's not that it's not sophisticated and helpful, it's just it's lost communication with the person that needs to get the message. So this is what glyphosate is doing, and part of this is what they are thinking is the smoking gun for a lot of autoimmune diseases, is the glyphosate has caused these big openings, and now the body can't recognize itself. It can't hear the messages from the cell phones from your workers. And so because of that, the protectors inside, the sharpshooters, are like, hey, whatever comes across the big gaping hole into our castle, we're killing everybody. So that's when you start getting the food allergies. That's when your body starts attacking itself. And that's the definition of an autoimmune disease, is your body is like, what the hell is that? I don't know. My people out front haven't been able to tell me, so we don't know any. And then it becomes friendly fire. And that's not the funnest thing, but that's what autoimmune disease is all about. It also can turn genes on and off. So because it's been inserted and it's a genetically modified product, it can turn things on or off. And so that's why you're seeing a lot of people maybe that carry genes that contain cancer, maybe if they've kept their inflammation at a low level, they don't turn on. But if you are inflamed or exposed to things like this, then it can turn on these genes and cause all kinds of havoc. So there is a very big trend in infertility too. This is what I see in my patients. A lot of men coming in, they don't have any sperm. The women have trouble having babies. It wasn't like that just even 10 years ago. It's making a lot of sense of why this is happening. So what do? You try to get that out of your diet and choose foods that are organic, for one, if you can, but specifically non-GMO, because 100% of those are going to contain those. Whoops. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Oh, there's that sexy guy right there. Okay. So last thing that is a disruptor here is blue light. And I'm sure if you're looking at this, you're like, that's not me. I don't do that. Not me. I go to bed at 9 o'clock and turn my kind of yellowed lights so that I can start my circadian rhythm. Maybe I take my melatonin. I'm not stressed at all. And I go straight to bed, right? Isn't that what you are? Chances are no. chances are you've got a belly full of genetically modified things that have ripped holes in this. Maybe you got a headache, so you take an anti-inflammatory, which is causing, destruction in the area of your small intestine. And because you can't go to sleep because you're in pain, and maybe some of these medications cause you to stay up with anxiety, you get on your computer and you use that little device there. But what starts to happen when you have this light, our ancestors always had like sunlight and moonlight to show their body chemistry, when to save calories and when to burn off calories. And when it's awake, that turns on all these hormones that show, hey, hold on to food, because we're awake and we need to store. When you're sleeping, it's like you're going into hibernation. It's pretty interesting. So when you have the blue light coming at you, you're invoking this awake. And we see that people that stay awake and are, in front of blue lights throughout the night, it's pretty telling that they're going to gain weight and have all kinds of different issues. Now, some ways to get around this is kind of make some goals for yourself to turn off your blue light at some point by a certain time in the night. Usually it's like after dinner. Try to get away from that computer, get away from that phone, make it a rule for your family, because you can imagine what it's doing to your children when you hand them an iPad. But also, if you have to be on the computer, then get some of those glasses that are yellow. They have this yellow screen. You can get them on Amazon. They're really cheap. But they start to kind of let your eyes start to feel like, oh, it's starting to be night. And then your body turns into that kind of sleepy melatonin kind of place, and you're able to go to sleep. So you can do that. Now, all of this blue light, and the 5G, a lot of this stuff we don't yet know what the health implications are, but there are some pretty good signals that it isn't good to have a router right next to your head. There are some pretty sophisticated little things that you can put on your machine, on your little devices, or even on your bed sheets, like your pillowcase, that plugs into a grounding. So in case you do have like electronic devices around you, you can sleep on a sheet or a pillowcase that is actually plugged into the ground, that grounds out and ceases all electrical activity. So we find that absolutely brings inflammation down for people that, maybe we've changed everything else about their diet, but they have like, a alarm clock, they've got a cell phone, their iPad, their computer's right there. They're sleeping with their phone right next to their head, things like that. I know you never do that, right? So think about that, because you can short that out. There's also the grounding or earthing kind of movement out there, where you get barefoot, get out in nature, which we've already talked about. But by doing that, you are getting rid of that kind of scattered electrical stuff that's happening in your body and letting it ground out. Similar to what they do in hospitals, so that when they get struck by lightning, not all the hospital beds, get struck by lightning. It's grounded so that, no electronic equipment can get into and change what's happening in the body. Pretty interesting stuff there, okay? So lots of things. What does that look like when it happens in our body? All of these things. Food allergies. So maybe you don't even know you have food allergies until maybe last week, when you're like, wow, do I feel better when I don't eat that ice cream right before I go to bed? I didn't have the gut ache. I didn't get up 45 times to pee that night and have anxiety. Okay, what about autoimmune disease? The funny thing about autoimmune disease is about 10 years ago, there was like 10 different autoimmune diseases. Now, the rheumatologist basically does a blood test, and it shows like, it's like the new spectrum. Like, they don't even know what it's named yet, but they show an inflammatory marker of an autoimmune disease. So they don't even know what the name of it is yet, because it's such a spectrum. So it started out with some of these big ones that had classic symptoms. like rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, all of those kind of things, you know, now it's a whole, you can have a varied amount of that happening in your body. And then that would send you to rheumatologist, which they would put you on suppressants, big, huge drugs with lots of side effects that cause all kinds of other things. So that's a pretty intense little thing to have to deal with. And if you've gotten a diagnosis of autoimmune disease, it's best for you to try desperately to reduce your inflammation in all these other ways before you have to go on some of those diseases or some of those medications. SIBO, which I mentioned a couple times, is the small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, SIBO. It's one of those bacterial overgrowths that we do not, you know, we're getting unsuccessful with killing in the hospitals even, because it's a little smart little guy. It's outsmarted us. It's gotten used to our antibiotics because we're constantly bathing them with the antibiotics. And SIBO is like, really? I'm used to that. I'm way better than that. I got bigger gangs that can overtake you, dude. So the other thing is inflammatory bowel disease. Which is close to my heart as well, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's, diverticulitis, celiac, all of these things have kind of cropped up in the last, I'd say 20 years. Pretty conveniently, that's when the Roundup and glyphosate started to be, you know, commercially available to everyone, was about 1986. That's when everything started really increasing. Constipation, diarrhea, burping, reflux, bloating. You know, most of us take NSAIDs or take, you know, stomach acid reducers and stuff like that, and we don't even list it on our list of medications because it's so innocuous to us. But let me tell you, it's contributing to your inflammation soup. So the brain fog, forgetfulness, all of this is connected to the other side of your castle, which is the blood supply that goes straight to your brain and everything, okay? And so that, of course, I would say one of the number one things that if you reduce inflammation, you're going to get rid of first is headaches. And that's probably the one thing that will bring somebody to the doctor first. And what do they give them? Drugs, pain. And then it moves on to opioids. And then they can't get off the opioids, and it's a big hot mess from there, as we now know. Mood swings, depression, anxiety, all of those things can be because of that second gut being affected, or the second brain being affected. And then part of what happens when you blow up the wall is the stuff that's supposed to be able to go through the wall can't. It can't be absorbed anymore. So these people, usually the high inflammation people, are the ones that they have very low vitamin D levels in their blood work, despite taking an overabundance of vitamin D3, that it just doesn't absorb correctly. And part of the reason why is you don't have a secure border that would allow your workers to break it down to shove it through the door, right? So obviously, skin eruptions are part of that as well, because the outside pig pen of your biome is actually happening. And in Chinese medicine, this is the first place a pathogen or something is going to come into your body. Your largest organ, which is your skin, right? So it's going to attack your skin first, or it's going to inhale and then vent out through your skin. Okay, so that's the first entry point into the body. But now what do? How are you supposed to help your army of people? And therefore help your brain. Part of what they're realizing too is this army, when it's decimated, it can't communicate with the bacteria on the other side that are near the blood flow and the lymph that is going to the brain. So the inflammation breaks these little highway systems that go to your brain. So then you got the MSs, the Alzheimer's, the things like that are happening because the cell phones aren't working between these two people, right? So Chinese medicine has some pretty cool ideas to help with this, and one of them is, again, shiitake mushrooms. Um, it contains this lentinan, an antiviral substance, and it has some immunostimulating activities. I like to just use shiitake mushrooms all the time as stir fry. You can, Vitamix it up and make it as meat patties, as a meat substitute, because it kind of has a meaty texture. Um, Chinese herbs are well known for helping the immune system, and we call them tonics because these are things that you would take on a daily basis to keep yourself healthy, versus the sick kind of protocol that you wait till you get sick, then you go to the doctor, then you're given something just for that specific thing. Chinese believe it completely the opposite, that you take care of yourself ahead of time, and then you don't have to go in and have these acute different things. So I just put a couple of these different specific herbs. Now in Chinese medicine, we don't go to like the Whole Foods and go, I need astragalus, because astragalus by itself is great, but that's almost like having a tuba player for a band. Okay, the tuba player is great on his own, but you want the whole, the whole band to be playing so that you can get the best out of that. And that's exactly what happens in Chinese formulas. So you use the astragalus as the ginseng. The easy thing to do with astragalus, though, is, in China, they are putting it in their soups, in their hot pots and stuff like that, that it's kind of in everything. And then they're drinking ginseng teas throughout the day. And that is an immune system booster. A couple different Chinese herbal formulas that your herbalist or your acupuncturist like me can prescribe for you. These are also considered drugs, so you can only get them through your licensed acupuncturist practitioner, because these are not available, by the public. Obviously, what can affect your immune system is acupuncture. And of course, I'm happy to see that, but the research is unbelievable about how acupuncture long-term can increase the body's T-cell count. And so it's no accident that cancer patients are aided, and some of the sickest people in the world come for acupuncture because it can help regain the immune system, get rid of bad bacteria, help kind of proliferate all the good bacteria, and just in general affect your mood. So that's obviously a plug for my own business. Yay, acupuncture. But also Tai Chi and Qigong, some of these mind-body things. When you add your mind into the movement that you're doing, kind of like what we did in the yoga class, it can strengthen your immune system as well, because you're putting your mindset into those places that need a little bit more attention. And with that, it stimulates your own natural defenses so that you can take care of that. So a couple things, I was talking earlier about, like, now what? We just did the food elimination diet and kind of figured out some of the big things that are causing us some big problems. Now, what do you eat? So the good things that don't have a lot of those invaders or disruptors. Extra virgin olive oil is amazing, but you also have to know the source. And part of that, they're starting to sneaky put in corn and soybean oil as a blend. And I think there's a rule of extra virgin olive oil only has to have like 20 or 40% of olive oil in order to have the package say olive oil, and the rest of it can be other oils, other cheap oils. So you want to make sure, and there's a list that I can provide you of the ones that are real, that you can get in the grocery store. Avocado oils, walnut oils, sesame oils, coconut oils, avocados, all of these are really good things, good fats to have in your diet that are big in the omega-3 fatty acids versus the 6s, which usually come from the inflammatory products of corn and soybeans. So all the different lettuces, all these greens, leafy greens, all good stuff there, especially broccoli, cauliflower has this specific stuff in it that has been shown in studies to get rid of colon cancer. So these type of and that there's a little product called DIM, D-I-M, that shows that. Broccoli, cauliflower, cruciferous vegetables, Brussels sprouts, cabbages, things like that. And then, you know, we have all been vilifying carbohydrates like they're the devil because we've been told that, you know, the ketogenic diet is going to save all our problems. But those populations that live past 100, they're not eating ketogenic diets, okay? They just weren't. In fact, they were eating a diet very low in animal protein, if any. I mean, it was mainly a plant-based diet, and what they were doing was using resistant starches that replenish the gut bacteria. So when you're feeding and replenishing your rainforest, then obviously some of these resistant starches, the resistant meaning that your body actually can't break it down on its own. It needs this good bacteria in order to break it down to send it through. And those actually are the good fats that cross over your border. And these come in the form of like green bananas, plantains, sweet potatoes, taro, all the things that you've been told are going to make you gain weight, all of that. Just exchange your regular potatoes for a sweet potato or taro chips instead of potato chips. Not that I want you eating potato chips, but if you're going to choose something, you know, try to do it like that. Okay. Oh. And then the last thing here is, you know, some of the things that help your gut bacteria the most, your gut brain, is to intermittently fast. Like we've been talking about before, this is more of a push for that. You know, our ancestors, our cavemen, you know, they ate when they had food. And so the intermittent fast actually shows your body, yo, it's okay, you know, to rest and digest until the next meal comes along. And it's also, hey, shift to already the grocery store that's living in our body to take from there rather than having to tip off the gas tank every time. So every so often, skip a meal, throw your body off whack a little bit, kind of play with that kind of window of intermittent fasting, and you'll be surprised at how much your body changes and reacts to that. Eat some nuts, but not legumes. Now, it's no accident that like walnuts look like brains because they are made of amazing fats that really help your brain. So if you're going to go in for a big test or a big presentation, eat some nuts. So these are not legumes. Legumes can create these reactive plant proteins called lectins. This comes in the form of wheat and all of the outside shells of these grains. That's part of the reason why grains can be upsetting to our digestive system. It's something the Asian countries have known for a long, long time. How can these Asians eat tons and tons of white rice and still be skinny, and yet we Americans eat brown rice and we're fatter than ever? Well, part of it is because that outside coating is almost like an inflammatory process that our body can't break down. It's called a lectin. And so they're found in beans, they're found in legumes, and it really sets off big holes in your digestive system. So part of the diet that I'm giving you for this week takes out those inflammatory plants, and including some of those legumes. Now, I'm not taking your beans away completely. If you are a vegetarian and you only eat beans as your protein source, that's fine. You just need to do it in a pressure cooker because the pressure cooker takes the lectins out. Okay, so we'll talk more about that. But using flour alternatives instead of your regular wheat kind of base things or rice or any of those things, try using almond flour or coconut flour instead. They have the least amount of allergens. And of course, any lectin-free grain that you can find, which there's not many. One is sorghum and the other one is millet. That's it. And because they're really easy to to digest, you can alternate those. But you can see now that grains are not your friend and probably are causing a lot of your problem. If you did nothing else but take out grains, it might be a giant help to your system. So again, adding in those resistant starches or switching them out so that you can really increase your rainforest and bring back your good workers with their cell phones and their barcodes. And again, reducing animal protein. This is the exact opposite of what the ketogenic people are talking about. And I get it because I wanted to do keto also. But what I also found was that all I was eating was processed meat and cheese and bacon. And I loved it. And I lost a little weight for a couple months, and then I went off the rails and I gained a bunch of weight back, and I had all these inflammatory things start to happen. Not to mention the fact that you're increasing saturated fat big time in your body, and also the propensity to have cancer, which is directly associated with animal protein. So we want to kind of use that sparingly. And the most lectin kind of meat is obviously the lectins that are eaten by what you eat. So those cows that eat the corn and the soybeans that are filled with the lectins are going into your body causing inflammatory stuff. So if you are going to choose a meat, then do a grass-fed meat that isn't fed corn and soybeans, but also they are on a pasture where they have been shown in studies to have less E. coli in their system than when they're put on concrete in feedlots. So that's interesting. And let me tell you that none of the meat that is in the fast food restaurants is grass-fed, okay? It's the cheapest, sickest animals that they can make into a hamburger, and that's what you're getting. And let me tell you, it's all corn and soybeans. Okay, so want to avoid that. But also fruit is a candy of sorts, and it's sugar. And when, if you think about when fruit is ripe and in season, it's usually summer. And that's when our ancestors would eat as much as they could. It was sweet for a reason, so that they could fill up on it when it was in season, kind of fatten up for the winter when it wasn't around, and they could use that as fuel throughout the winter. Now fruit is available every day, all day long, in our fruit smoothies, all day, and it's causing havoc in our body. So if you're going to eat fruit that has a low glycemic index and a low lectin, which are usually those really dark purple type of fruits, blueberries, blackberries, strawberries, things like that. And usually fruit that has seeds in it are the babies of a plant. And it's no accident. Plants also don't want to be eaten. And every living thing, plants and us, we don't want to die. So we do things in our bodies to protect not being killed. And that's what these types of fruits do. We think that plants are, all good for us, but actually the fruit, and the reason why I bring this up is because a lot of the nightshades, tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, all of those are seeds, cucumbers, and they're actually considered fruits because that is what the plant is putting forward to increase its life and the life of its family, right? So what it does is it puts these lectins in there so that it can cause problems for you in the future. So that's why the people in Italy don't have as much gut issues, because the Italian grandma would blanch the tomato, pull off the outside coating of the tomato, which was part of where the lectins are, and then squeeze out the seeds, because the seeds are where all the lectins are. So if that's a little easier on your stomach. So it's the same with, if you're just going to eat some fruits, try to avoid the ones that have seeds in them, which is hard to do because that's the watermelons, that's the, papayas and things like that, and try to eat them as they are more green, because that's when you're going to get the more healthful benefits from them and the less lectins, okay? So all this to say, I put together like the next level. So we've kind of taken out some big inflammatory foods. See how you feel about that. And this next 7 days is a low lectin food plan. So not only are you going to look at the disruptors and invasions, the invaders that are happening with you, but you're also, you have the opportunity to try a low lectin food plan. So what that looks like is some definitely I have protein in here because we're not, completely protein free yet. But it also uses cooked foods that use fruits and vegetables that are low in that inflammatory lectin. So I find that when I get people to take lectin, simply lectin, out of their diet, they can absolutely have better digestive stuff, and headaches go away, and some flares from rheumatoid arthritis go down, things like that. So that's going to be coming your way, low lectin diet. And so this week's action step is to pick and post a couple invaders or disruptors that you're going to think about trying to do something about. Just two. I think I listed like 7 or 8. But you can pick something that you may want to make a change with. And then if you're up for it, try the 7-day low lectin food plan and see how you feel on it. Okay. So, as you know, keeping the end in mind, which is health and no disease. We want to be independent so nobody is depending on us as we're sick. We want freedom and we want spunk. That's all we want. Hallelujah. So, next week is also a very great topic. It is, how do you manage your sleep and your energy and your stress? I got all kinds of tricks and tips and things that will help you sleep better, which also makes you healthier. And it can also make you lose weight. So all of these things will help you lose weight, kind of indirectly, like it happens without you trying. That's what's so funny about all of the tracking and the this and the that, is that, if you make some of these shifts, you can lose some pounds. And it usually happens around your belly, where most of the inflammation is. Next week's fascinating stuff with stress, and sleep, and controlling your energy, which all of us need help with. So hope you have a great week, and look forward to talking with you or seeing you on the Facebook post on our little group. So have a great week, everybody. Mahalo and aloha.